Being raised in the gorge was great, absolutely wonderful. I was able to run around in the forest, and my favorite thing was to take a book and a sandwich and hike up to some place where I could see the gorge and the mountains and have peace. And that's exactly what the property brings for me today and the gorge brings to me today.
My first involvement in the gorge was when I was very young. We used to walk through the tunnel, the railroad tunnel right below Cape Horn. We used to dare each other. Those things are still the same. They are still the same.
In the beginning, there was no names, different from us. We were different from each other. We're all one people that lived in harmony along the river.
Came here to the gorge, hadn't been here in 30 years. I had this epiphany, if you will, where I realized that this was my home. And it was amazing to me to come back 30 years later. And what I remembered as a kid growing up in the region was still there. That grandeur, that national treasure view.
I am Esther Evelyn Estey, radio show host y activista de la comunidad. I love living here. There is beauty, recreation, and history. It is a fascinating place to grow up. This place, like most places, is full of people. How people interact with one another and with the environment is something we often take for granted. Stewardship to me is a lifestyle of taking care of ourselves, others, and the beautiful land that we live in.
So stewardship to me is knowing your place, loving your place.
Stewardship is assuming responsibility. Stewardship is how you care for the place in which you live.
I'm Ellen Morris Bishop. I teach geology at Columbia Gorge Community College. Stewardship is not about stewarding just what we have here this moment, but it's also about stewarding a landscape that's changing constantly. Since the time that people came to the Columbia River Gorge, the gorge has remained fairly stable, pretty much unchanged. So the first people who came here probably would have seen a landscape similar to what we see here today.
My name is Bill Weiler. I'm a longtime resident of Lyle, Washington. Raised my kids here.
The Columbia River Gorge is about 85 miles long. It includes parts of two states, Oregon and Washington, and stretches from Portland and Vancouver in the west to the Deschutes River in the east. From rain-drenched evergreen forests to high desert grasslands. There are 13 urban areas, additional communities, and 4 treaty tribes in the area. Today we have a regional identity that transcends geographic, political, social, and tribal borders.
This is my homeland. This is where my people have always been, and this is where we will continue to be until the end of time.
Stewardship means getting to know a piece of land, recording its daily rhythms, becoming part of it, becoming connected to it. Not only do we have a diversity of habitat here for wildlife and floral species, but we also have a diversity of people.
My grandfather came here to the Columbia Gorge in 1948 from Great Plains, New York. He was a great example of wisdom and stewardship. From my grandfather, I learned that the future generations will be impacted by the decisions that you and I do or don't make today.
This is a landscape that commands respect. This is a landscape that we can come to and learn the history of the Columbia River, learn the history of a major artery, a major river of the Northwest.
One thing stewards have to be good at is being good observers, and that takes time. The more data and information you have, the better decisions you'll be able to make.
I am in the process of developing a forest stewardship plan for my family property at Cook, Washington. And the stewardship plan will lay out the steps necessary over the next few years and beyond for making sure that this property can provide value. A forest stewardship plan is very exciting. There are so many things that I have to decide. There's so many ways that I can take care of this forest. What kind of trees do I want to grow? When do I want to thin? How am I going to harvest? What about the water? How am I going to assure that the forest itself will be a resource for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren?
When we first came, Jewett Creek was totally overgrown. There were no salmon coming back to spawn. The fourth grade classes are coming down and taking water quality testing and basically surveying the stream each month. We call it Stream Survey. The program started in probably the mid-'80s with one teacher doing it in her class and raising eggs. I think this has made the kids who go through the program have much more aware of their environment and the natural resources in the area, and it really gives them ownership in especially this stream, and also I think in salmon throughout the gorge.
We have a tremendous opportunity here to make stewardship here in the gorge a model for other places. We have the natural beauty, we have a community of willing people, now we just need to move it forward.
So stewardship of the gorge, whether it's rocks, it's ecosystems, it's communities, it's wild communities, or it's human communities, is one of the most important things that we can do. Because this is a landscape that we want to, we need to, and we should pass on to others so that they can care for it as well and enjoy it as much as we can, and perhaps more.
My name's Andy Fisher. I'm an associate professor of history at the College of William & Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. In the early 20th century, who had created national parks and so forth, but they thought of environmentalism or conservation much more in terms of sustainable development. In 1957, the Army Corps of Engineers completed construction of the Dalles Dam, and when the gates closed on that day in March, the Dalles-Halilo Reach was flooded, and the fishery at the falls and the communities that had traditionally used it were destroyed or displaced. And today, we look back at this, many people in the Northwest, not just Native people, look back at this with a sense of regret for the loss of this amazing place. And we wonder, what were they thinking? Why did they destroy this fishery? But you have to remember that for non-Indians in the 20th century in the Pacific Northwest, dams were the key to regional progress.
Certainly 100 years ago, we thought that the forests of the Northwest were endless, that we could log them to whatever degree we wanted and they would always be back, or we would never get to their end. We saw a world of infinite resources, and now we're beginning to understand that those resources are not infinite, that those resources are finite, and that we as people who want to live here with them need to protect and preserve them. Not only just preserve the resources that we have, but we need to think about how things are changing, because we live on a changing planet.
By the 1980s, many more people were environmentalists.
And in 1986,
The Columbia Gorge National Scenic Area was created. The Federal Stewardship Plan allowed for a framework of consensus and collaboration. The NSA managed to preserve many of the scenic qualities recognized as important, while also allowing communities to prosper.
Proust has a quotation that basically says, the real voyage of discovery is not seeking new landscapes, but having new eyes.
How often do we think about the effect our actions have on the lives of others? It is important to think about how we interact. One of the most important questions we need to ask is, what is in our hearts?
The challenge is to get everyone to come together. That's the true essence of collaboration. And if you can do that, the future is very bright.
This river has carved its gorge for millions of years.
Stewardship is the bridge from the past to the future.
We have to engage that future, my future, today.
Have a conversation.
See with new eyes.
Stay connected.